So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do the short rows. Now, the short rows are optional. You can leave them out if you want to. Short rows are a little bit more difficult, but even if you're new to short rows, they're not that bad, honestly. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do the short rows. So just have a practice. I recommend, and I'll show you how to put in a lifeline. So I don't know whether you can see it, but underneath the pink bit, there's an orange lifeline that goes through all my stitches and then hangs that here. So I put the lifeline in just to make sure that I was happy with what I was doing, so that if I wasn't happy with what I was doing, I could just pull the needles out of my stitches, unravel the short rows, and then my stitches would be sitting on that lifeline and I can just slip them back on. So the first thing I do is show you how to do the lifeline. So if you're worried at all, put a lifeline in and then see how you get on. You can also cast on a few stitches and just do a little practice piece and practice the short rows first. So I'm doing a short rows tutorial especially for this, but I also have a sort of standard short row tutorial, which I've linked to in the pattern as well. So you can check that one out if you prefer. That's a little, possibly a little bit shorter, I'm not sure. So what I recommend you do is you weigh the yarn before you start a short row, so work out how much yarn you've used so far. That's important if you have a limited amount of yarn. So I've heard from lots of people who, for their main colour, only have 400 meters. Now I've got 500 meters because this skein was 500 meters. I don't know yet, but I'm going to use all of it. So I recommend when you finish part one, weigh the yarn, write it down or you will forget. Write down how much you've used, and then you can use that to help you work out when you need to start the final part at the end, because the final part will kind of mirror the first part. And then work the short rows. I've done them in a separate color. If you only have one color or using a self-striping yarn or something like that, you can do them in one color. You can do them in the same color, sorry. You don't have to change color. You can do them in stripes if you want to, although that would mean changing stripes at this end on a wrong side row, so I don't think that'll look very good, which is why I color blocked it. So I've done 2 wedges of short rows kind of stacked in opposite directions. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you have any questions, just ask, and I'll be back in a few days with the next section. So I'm going to put a lifeline in before I start the next section, just to make sure it's okay. So I've just got some cotton. I could do with yarn that's a little bit thinner, but I happen to find this, and it's quite smooth because it's cotton. So if you're using interchangeable needles, can you see here, you've got that little tiny hole. Let's see if I can get that to focus, I don't know. So I've got that hole here. If you have a like a yarn threader, needle threader that you can poke through there and then pull the yarn through, you can actually knit the lifeline in. It's best to do it on the last row before you want to put the lifeline in. So I should have done it as I knitted the last row, but I didn't. So the way you normally put a lifeline in is get a sewing needle and the yarn, and if you're using a circular needle, put the yarn onto the cable part of the needle because it's easier, and then just pull it through. Now when you get to the stitch marker, you've got to be careful not to go through the stitch marker. So I've gone up to the stitch marker, and then I pulled it out, and then I'm going to skip the stitch marker and then carry on putting it through. I do recommend lifelines, especially if you're doing things so you are new techniques, whether it's lace knitting, colour work, cables, whatever it is. If it's new techniques, anything you're not sure about, anytime when you think there may be a risk that you have to rip back, it's a good idea to put a lifeline in. Just be careful that you don't accidentally split the stitches. That's happened to me before, so you do have to kind of pay attention a little bit when you're doing it. You're basically just going through all the stitches. If you have your stitches on a straight needle, it will be a little bit more difficult. You have to use the smaller sewing needle than what I've got. I'm using quite a big one, so that makes it a bit easier, and it doesn't really matter. So I'm actually going on the wrong side really, because I started from the lace end, from the edging end, rather than from the end where my working yarn was. It doesn't really matter. So the idea with the lifeline is that your stitches will, you put the lifeline in, then you can just carry on knitting, and then if you make a mistake or you don't like what you're doing, or for any reason you need to unpick it or rip it back, you can just pull your needle out and unravel quickly back to where the lifeline is, and then your stitches will sit neatly on the lifeline, ready for you to slip them back on a knitting needle. So a lot of people use very thin thread for lifelines, and even things like dental floss. I don't really like using anything that thin, because if I need to put the stitches back on the needles, I find it easier if I go slightly thicker yarn. So I tend to, most of the time, I tend to go for 4-ply fingering weight, sock weight yarn. I wouldn't, if I was knitting with a lace thread yarn or even a sock yarn, I wouldn't go for something really chunky or thick. This, I think this is a 4-ply. No, actually it might be a DK yarn, so probably it's a little bit thick for the yarn I'm using, but I'm not worried about it. Okay, so there we go. So I got right to the end now, and then I want to just make sure before I cut the yarn, the idea is that what I tend to do is when I cut the yarn is to make sure that I've got enough so that I can stretch this out, and then I tend to tie the ends together like that, so that I can't accidentally pull this out. And it is quite long, so I can like stretch this out completely. Actually, it doesn't need to be quite that long, so I'm going to shorten it a little bit. There we go. Okay, so that's the lifeline in. So now I'm going to start a short rows. Now there is I do have a proper German short row tutorial on my website, which I think is also linked in the pattern, but I'm also going to show you how to do it here. So, right, so I'm actually going to start joining my new yarn, which is bright pink, matches my trousers. So I'm just going to leave that grey strand. My yarn's kind of gone from black to grey now, my main colour. Leave that hanging down. So the way I join in the new yarn, I just leave the old yarn hanging down, and then I just leave a tail from the new yarn about 10 centimeters, 4 inches, enough so I can weave it in. I just leave that hanging down, and then I start knitting. So I'm going to knit till I get to the marker. Now you've got to be a little bit careful when you knit this first row to make sure that you don't knit into the lifeline. So just take a little bit more time when you knit the first row. Okay, so I'm going to knit this row. First row you're going to do as normal. So knit to the marker. When you get to the marker, you're going to knit row 1 of chart A. So you're not doing any increases now. We've stopped doing the make 1 increases. So I'm going to just do this because I'm doing this a little bit slower. It's taking me a little bit more time. So I'm going to switch the camera off, knit this row, and then I'll come back and show you row 2. So I've got to the marker now. I'm not doing a make 1 before the marker this time. Knitting to the marker, slipping the marker, and then I'm just going to do row 1 of chart A. Okay, like that. So now I've done 1 row after the lifeline. You can see the lifeline there under the pink stitches. Once you've done that first row after the lifeline, it's a bit easier, because at least you don't have to worry about knitting into the lifeline by accident. Okay. So next row says work row 2 of chart A, So row 2 of charades, just slip on and then knit to the marker. Slip the marker, and then I'm going to knit to the last 10 stitches. So I've now got, before I started row 1, I had 9 stitches, I think it is, for the edging. So I had 9 stitches here for the edging, and then 104 stitches for the body of the shawl. So on row 1 I knitted 104 stitches up to the marker. I'm just knitting as fast as I can. Oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. I just pulled my, if you do that, if you accidentally pull your needle out of all the stitches, just shove the needle back into your stitches as quickly as possible. And if any of them drop down, which mine didn't, then you can always fix that later. But if you accidentally pull your needle out of all your stitches or some of your stitches, just push the needle in as quickly as possible, just so you don't just so they don't start to unravel. And if any have unraveled, once you've got them back on the needles, you can then go through them and check that they're all okay, and fix any that need fixing. Right, so I'm just knitting. I haven't actually been counting, but I'm knitting to the last 10 stitches, which should mean that I'm knitting about 94 stitches, I think. From the marker, so 94 from the marker, I think it works out at. So let's see how close we are. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 4, 6, 8, 10. So I've got to knit 10 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. Okay, so I'm just going to double check. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So now I'm going to turn. So I'm ready to do a wrong side row, and I've also realized I haven't been counting my rows, so I'm just going to, so I've done row 1 and 2. Okay, so we're on row 3 now. So the first thing I'm going to do is slip the first stitch and wrap it. So you're not really wrapping it, but I couldn't find another kind of term to use for it. And the slipping is slightly different from the way we've been slipping the first stitch of every row. It does make that clear, I think, in the instructions above this section. So do read those instructions carefully. So what I want you to do is you're going to slip the first stitch with the yarn in front. So I'll show you the English style first, and I'll show you continental. So hold the yarn in front of your knitting, slip the first stitch purlwise. So even though we are knitting, we are slipping it purlwise. And then normally you would take the yarn between the needles in order to knit the next stitch. We're not going to do that this time. We're going to pull it up and over the right hand needle. So I've slipped the stitch purlwise with the yarn in front, then I've pulled it over the right hand needle, and can you see what happens here? I've actually pulled the stitch up from the row below and over the needle. You see that? So it looks like I've got like 2 strands there. That's right. And then because I'm going to knit, you're just going to leave the yarn there, and I'm going to start knitting. But you need to hold it fairly tight. So if you knit English style, you tend to kind of relax it a bit when you go to knit the first stitch. So just make sure you pull it tight and try and keep it fairly tight. So I'm going to put that one back again, and then I'm going to show you how to do continental style. So continental style, you can keep the yarn at the back like that, put your needle under, put your finger over, slip the stitch purlwise, and then just pull like that. So I'll show you that again. So continental style, yarn in your left hand, put your needle under the yarn like that, put your right index finger on it just to control it, go into the first stitch purlwise, take it off, and then because your yarn working on is already going across here, you can just pull really tight so that you pull up the strands from the stitch below. Also continental style, you can do it, but hang on, where you actually hold the yarn in front like that, slip the stitch purlwise, and then take it over the right hand needle and pull it. Okay, whichever way you do it, you just got to slip that first stitch purlwise with the yarn in front and then pull it up and over the right hand needle. So now, and then pull it fairly tight. So that's going to give you like a really funny looking stitch. I call it a double stitch. I kind of tend to call it a weird stitch because it does look very strange. So I'm now going to knit till I get to the marker. I keep not knitting the stitches properly. I kind of not getting my needle through at them properly, like there. So I have to kind of like stop and like flick it over with my thumb. Probably because I'm filming it, I can't actually see very well what I'm doing. I'm kind of looking through the camera at what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to knit to the marker, slip the marker across, and then row 3 of the chart is knit 3, knit 2 together, yarn over twice, SSK. I'm not going to show you how to do that again because you've done that a lot now. Knit 1, yarn over, knit 2. So that's row 3. So if you go back to here at the beginning of the row, you can see here the first 10 stitches here I've only done 1 row, whereas here you can see I've done 3 rows. So let me just click my row counter. I do find it easy when I'm doing short rows to forget to click my row counter. Well, that can be a little bit annoying. It's not too difficult now because I can see easily how many rows I've done, but it's a little bit frustrating when I forget. So row 4, work row 4 of chart A, slip marker, knit to 10 stitches before the last turn. So slip the first stitch, and then I'm going to knit till I get to that double yarn over, knit the first stitch, and then knit the second one through the back loop. Then I'm going to knit to the marker, slip the marker across, and then I'm going to knit to 10 stitches before my previous turn. Now, one thing I want to mention is I've actually left my original yarn attached, and that is because I'm not 100% sure that this is going to work the way I want it to. So just in case I end up having to unpick it, I didn't want to break the main yarn. There is also a chance that maybe I will be able to carry on using that main yarn without breaking it. But you can break it if you want to. You also don't have to use a different colour for this bit. If you're only knitting, some of you are knitting in self-striping yarns, for example, you can just carry on with the same colour. So, just knitting as fast as I can. So you're going to stop 10 stitches before the previous turn. Now, it is fairly easy to see where you turn, but if you're struggling, when you turn, you can always put a marker where you turn, so you can just see where your marker is and count from there. Or if you haven't got markers, just a loop of yarn will do. So I'm just going to, I'm not too close yet. Okay, so let's just check. Okay, so that's where I turn. So where you turn, can you see how the stitches automatically kind of, if I push them onto the needle a bit, the stitches kind of automatically push apart a little bit, and then when I look at that, so you get like a gap, and then when, after the gap, you can see that stitch looks a bit funny, and you look at it and you think, what have I done wrong? So that's where my turn is. So 10 stitches before that. Now that first stitch is a double stitch, so it looks like 2 stitches, but it's just 1 because it's that double stitch that we created when we turned last time. So 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 10, 6, 8, 9. So I've got to knit 9 more stitches. So you've got to make sure when you're counting that double stitch, that you're only counting it as a single stitch. Don't count it as 2 stitches. I didn't actually count properly there because I was talking at the same time. So let's just check. That's my gap. Quite a pronounced gap. And I can also see here that I've done fewer rows in the pink than I've done here. So that first stitch is 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, so I've turned now, so I'm now on row 4. Okay, so if you're knitting English style yarn at the front, slip the stitch purlwise, pull it up and over the right hand needle. Continental style, needle under the working yarn into the stitch purlwise, and then pull it, just so you pull a yarn up from below. And make sure you keep fairly good tension on that working yarn, so you don't let that slide back again. You want to keep it quite tight. And then I'm going to knit till I get to the marker. So we're now on row 5. Okay, so I've got to knit it to my marker, slip the marker across, and then I'm on row 5 of the chart, which is knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Knit through the back loop, knit 2, 3, yarn over, knit 2. There we go. So that's row 5 of the chart. Do like that whole pink with the grey black yarn, which is just what I wanted, a little bit of burst of colour. Okay, sorry, I keep knocking into my camera. Apologies for that. Okay, so row 6. So I'm going to do row 6, and then I'm going to let you go off at your own pace after this. Okay, so row 6, work the chart, which is just slip on, knit to the marker. Nothing exciting happening on row 6 on the chart side. Get to the marker, slip the marker across, and now I'm going to knit till 10 stitches before the previous turn. So quite a lot of knitting. Now you can of course count, so you start with 104, take 10 off 94, take 10 off 84, take 10 off 74. You can just kind of count it like that every time, but I don't tend to bother, mainly because I quite often watch telly and stuff when I knit, so I tend to just look at my knitting and work out where my previous turn was and count 10 stitches from there. But you do whatever you need to do depending on your level of experience and how your brain works. Okay, so I knitted too far there because I forgot to stop and check. So that's where my turn is, because I can see there's a little bit more of a gap there, and then I got that funny double stitch in front of it. The 1, 2, so I got to go back 8 more stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so let me double check that. So that's where my previous turn was, because I can see that gap. That's my double stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that was row 6. Click my marker off camera and then turn for row 7. Slip it with purlwise with the yarn in front, pull it over the right hand needle, pull it tight. Then I'm just going to knit to the marker and then do row 7. And then you just carry on like that. Each right side row, you just knit to the marker, knit the next row of the edging chart. Every wrong side row, you knit the edging, knit chart A, and then you just slip your marker, knit to 10 stitches before the previous turn. So just keep going like that till you've done row 15, and then I'll come back and show you row 16 in a minute. So I've now knitted the short rows. I've done the 16 rows of the chart. The last row 14, I knitted row 14 of the chart, slipped the marker, then I knitted 34, and then I turned. So the last row of the short rows was 34. So you can see I've got 16 rows there. Then on the other end, I've just got 1 row. So now I've also done row 15. So now I'm on row 16, and I'm going to work across this whole row and show you what to do with these short rows. With these double stitches now. So row 16, starting off as normal, slip on, knit to the marker, so I've got 9 stitches there before the marker, slip the marker across, and then I'm going to knit till I get to that first double stitch, which should be 33, I think. 2, 4, 6. So I've knitted 33. So the next stitch now is that double stitch. So you can see I got the gap here from where I turned previously, and then you got this funny double stitch. Now you will probably, when you get to it, see that it looks a bit strange, and if you put your knitting down and forget what you were doing, quite often you'll get it and you'll think, what have I done wrong? So it's kind of like a double stitch, but here it's got like a little kind of knot in it, almost like the 2 strands are like crossed over each other. So it does look weird. It looks like you've done something wrong. It doesn't look like a normal just 2 stitches next to each other. Anyway, the way you're going to work this stitch is just to knit it as a single stitch. So just put your needle in right through the middle of the stitch and knit it as a single stitch. So you end up with 1 stitch. This is the same whether you're doing knit stitches or purl stitches. If this was a purl row, I would do the same thing, but I would purl them instead. So on knit rows, you knit them together as a single stitch. On purl row, you just purl it as a single stitch. And then I'm going to knit to the next double stitch, which is knit 9. So knit 9, so I knitted 9, then I knitted that stitch, double stitch as a single stitch, then I'm going to knit 9, knit it as a single stitch, knit 9, knit it as a single stitch, knit 9, knit that as a single stitch, and then knit that double stitch, knit 9, then knit the double stitch, and then I got 10 stitches left. So I'm just going to knit to the end of the row now. There we go, and that last stitch is a little bit loose because that was the first stitch when I started the short row, so I just pulled the tail. I don't knot it or anything like that. I've still left my black yarn attached, by the way, or grey yarn as it is now. I don't knot those 2 together. I just leave a tail when I joined in, and the first couple of times when you knit across it, that stitch will become a bit bigger, so I just pull the tail to tighten it up and then carry on. Then at the end I'll just weave in those ends. A lot of people knot the tails when they join in. I don't like to do that, but whatever you do, it's up to you. So that's my first short row wedge. I'm now going to do another one with slightly different kind of shaping, so I'll show you how to do that as well. So I'm now going to do the second short row wedge, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to this is how my yarns look, because I want to try and carry that grey one up. I'm going to just loop the pink one around it just to carry that up, and then I'm going to slip the first one as normal, and then I'm going to knit to the marker. So I got to the marker, slip the marker, and then I'm going to do row 1 of the chart. And then row 2, so I'm just going to reset my row counter. Row 1, row 2, I'm going to work row 2 of the chart. Should just slip and then knit to the marker. So slip the marker across. Okay, so now I'm going to knit 34. So when you knit to 34, I like to go back and just double check. So from the marker, it should be 34. 2, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 6, 20, 30, 32, 34. So knit 34, and then I'm going to turn. And then I need to click my marker as well, because I've done row 2. So row 3 is slip the first one, 'cause this is short rows, remember. So slip the first one with the yarn in front. So I'm doing a continental style. Take the yarn over the right hand needle and pull it tight, just like you did before. Then I'm going to knit to the marker. Get to the marker, slip the marker across, and then I'm going to do row 3 of the chart. And split slightly, there we go. Yarn over, knit 2, so that was row 3 of the chart. And then row 4 I'm going to knit to, row 4 I'm going to knit to the double stitch. Hang on, let me just sort out my knitting first. Row 4, knit, work to the double stitch, so I'm going to work row 4 of the chart first, which is knit, slip on, knit to the double yarn over, knit one as normal, knit the second double yarn over through the back loop, and then knit to the marker, slip the marker across. So now I'm going to knit to the double stitch, so that's 33 stitches that I'm just knitting. So I'm not actually counting, I'm just knitting till I get to the double stitch. So that's the double stitch, so I'm going to knit that as a single stitch, just like we did before. And then I'm going to knit 10. Okay, so the double stitch is that one. So if you pull it down a bit, you can see it looks a little bit funny. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then I'm going to turn, so that was row 4. And then you're just going to carry on following the pattern. So this time we're knitting the short rows kind of in the other direction. So the first wedge we went nearly all the way back to the beginning of the row, then back, and then each wrong side row got slightly shorter. This time we started at a shorter, and then each wrong side row is getting slightly longer. So just carry on and do these 16 rows as well, and then I'll come back and show you what mine looks like.